say greetings to my illustrious panel. It's easily understated to say it's an honor to be among you. You're all longtime friends of mine. I know you all to have cast a very big shadow in this space. Huge hearts, big minds, solution-oriented, just toiling in this space. So I'm honored to have you here. Your impressive bios are in the program. Let me just dive right in and get to our topic, and thank you again. So my first to you, so I've curated some questions specific to each of you, and then my hope is that organically we can crosstalk just like a Thanksgiving dinner, right? So let's go in. Let's go with it. Mike, before we segue into management, you're deeply involved in the creation of a region-wide system that emphasizes preventing homelessness rather than reacting to it. Why is your focus on prevention, and what specific steps do you recommend?
Should I get a microphone? Dangerous thing to actually hand it to me, but I'm going to. So thank you, Craig, and it is not just an honor to be here and to support the Salvation Army, but for all of us, I think, a special treat to be here with you and the whole group. So I have a very strong view about this. We are never going to make progress on homelessness unless we change the paradigm from reacting to it to preventing it. And a statistic really makes that point. I was out here the whole day. You may have heard this before. The last full year for which we have stats is 23-24. In that time frame, LA County housed 19,000 people who had been experiencing homelessness in permanent housing. 10, 15 years ago, that would have solved half of the homelessness issue, just that. It's a huge success given where we were. Except, during the same period, 63,000 people used homeless services for the first time. Roughly 3 to 1. 3 people become homeless, 1 person gets housed. Statewide, the stats are a little bit better. It's about 2 to 1. But you can see, if we perpetuate our current approach, even the improved approach that has led Los Angeles to see a minor plateauing, a little bit of improvement here, we are never going to change this significantly. So what does that mean? What should we do? I think there is a very clear prescription as to what we should do to keep people stably housed. So we need to have a system, not just fragmented, isolated programs. Someone needs to be in charge of it. It needs to be targeted to people who would become homeless but for the services and housing they would get. No small and easy thing, by the way. And programs should be evaluated, which we don't do. So by and large, there are some programs that purport to be prevention programs throughout our region. Some might be working a little bit, some might not be, but there's no coherent, integrated system yet. But there could be help on the way. And one of the things that is so stunning about this moment is the potential for gigantic progress in changing this paradigm right now. And the crosswinds from Washington, which simultaneously threatened to not just slow, but reverse this trend at just the moment that you've decided to invest in it. And I won't speak for much longer. Let me just introduce this by saying this much. So about a year ago, last November, you passed Measure A, which has been referred to earlier today. And it funded what had been services for people experiencing homelessness, but it did an additional thing that may not have been discussed too much here so far. And that is, did you guys discuss the creation of La CASA, the Affordable Housing Solutions Agency? So there's never been such an agency here. State statute created it, and Measure A funded it with $400 or so million a year forever. That makes this unique in the country. And that group, the La CASA agency, whose board is comprised of boards of supervisors, members, Mayor Bass, council members, a lot of folks, that agency right now is in its first few months of its first fiscal year and is about to test, if all goes well, the efficacy of the targeted prevention system that I'm talking about, which would be a remarkable change from what's been happening in Los Angeles. So I have a lot more to say about this. It is a show for other people to participate in, so I'm going to pause for the moment. But I wanted to provoke a conversation about changing our paradigm, stopping reacting, moving to a much more upstream perspective on how you contend with homelessness. It is so much cheaper to deal with homelessness before it starts. And it is so much more humane. And we have this in our grasp, if only we make the choice to do it here. And I'll talk about Sacramento too. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Mike. Okay, so let me shift to that. Good, thanks. So, Maddie, poverty is the centerpiece of homelessness, but we know that the underpinning of poverty is rooted in factors including mental illness, substance abuse, PTSD, familial estrangement, and other forms of trauma. And in most cases, we see a dual diagnosis where two of these challenges are at issue. How do you see dealing with those affected by these challenges such that our unhoused population is managed in accordance with the condition that led them to the street?
Thank you. It's an easy answer. To answer that question, we have to get to the roots of the story of what happened.
You're an all-star with the Army, so I wanted to hit you with a tough one.
We have to get to the roots of what happened. What's each individual story and how they got there. Before, I'm going to answer this question in 3 parts, and they will all tie together. But before I do that, I need to know who had a birthday in September. Raise your hand. Back there. What is your name? One more time.
Ben.
Ben. Thank you, Ben. You don't have to tell me what date or how old. Just you had a birthday. Thank you. I'll circle back to you in a minute. So 3 parts and getting to the roots. I am a trauma-informed enthusiast. Why does that matter? We heard a little bit heard about that earlier, right? Well, Dr. Bruce Duncan Perry has a phenomenal book called What Happened to You. He co-authored it with Oprah Winfrey. They talk about the importance of the neurosequential model of therapeutics. Fancy word for complex trauma impacts the literal neuroscience of the brain. From early development to adulthood, there are things happening neurologically that impact people's choices, decisions, how they interact with the world around them. According to adverse childhood experiences statistics, and if you haven't heard that, and if you haven't taken the quiz yourself, I highly recommend. Usually I have a slide that shows all 10, not today. I'll encourage you to take it. There's these 10 questions that they have found consistently. Dr. Anda and Dr. Folletti back in the 1990s, early 2000s, did a research study with over 60,000 people with Kaiser Permanente. And what they found was the more ACEs people had, the more at risk they were for a lot of different things, medically, housing, substance use, academically, employment-wise. When we look at the national statistics for adverse childhood experiences, 67% approximately of Americans have at least one adverse childhood experience. 17% have at least 4. Now, when I focus over to specifically the unhoused population, Harvard did a recent study that showed that of the unhoused population, 90% of those struggling with housing have at least one adverse childhood experience. 60% have 4 or more. What does 4 or more mean? 4 or more means, just to take a few off the top, 17% of those individuals are of those that have the 4 or more, they are 17 times more likely to think about or potentially attempt to commit suicide. They are 10 times more likely to have medical and chronic medical issues over a lifetime. They are 10 times or more likely to use substances. So when we start there, and we understand the implications from childhood all the way to adulthood, I have to also reference Mr. World-renowned psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner. And he came up with the social ecological framework and system that said, hey, we've got to look at things from the micro level and thinking about human development and just what leads to wellness for people. You have to look at the context of the different layers. And we've been talking about those layers throughout all of today. The individual, well, who's their family members? Who are their caregivers? Where's the child care facility that they're going to, and how well do those systems in the meso framework of those work together? Then you have that exosystem, which is the local food pantry, or the local health clinic or medical clinic, the college, the university, the high school campus. And then you take it beyond that in the macro system. What are the policies and the laws that each affect each individual person? Because I can have a community, a forum of 100 people, but even in this room, how you interact with the people you're sitting next to, or even how you got here or where you're going home to, the context is all different, and the context matters. So when we talk about addressing prevention and looking at all these things, we have to start with how are we more trauma-informed as a collective, and then how are we also bringing different parties together to address the different social determinants of health in our local community. So for fun, because it's also lunch, I'm curious, what are our 5 social determinants of well-being in Los Angeles County? And I think I have a few friends that are going to help me out. Who has number 1? There are 5. Who has number 1? Please stand, number 1. Myra, thank you. What is the number 1 determinant of social well-being in LA?
Economics, sustainability.
Thank you. Stay standing. Who has number 2? Anna, thank you. Please read it.
Education access and quality.
Excellent. Thank you. Who has number 3?
Healthcare access and quality, mental and physical.
Excellent. Stay standing. Thank you. Number 4.
Social and community contact.
Thank you, Susanna. Who has number 5?
Neighborhood and built environment, access to food, safe housing, and transportation.
There's a box lunch prize for all of you.
Yeah. So stay standing, okay? So the 5 social determinants of well-being. So we know that they're important, but sometimes these things are at different locations. Sometimes they're trying to solve things on their own. So to make this point, Ben,
Yes.
it's your birthday. So I want you all to face Ben. Don't move from where you're at. I have asked each of them to think of a song of their own choosing. I'm gonna tell you, so keep also just looking at me at some point, and I'm gonna tell you when to stop, but you're gonna cover your ears. You ready? You're gonna cover your ears, and I'll tell you when to stop, but I want you to sing to Ben the song that you have picked, okay, out loud. As loud as you can, okay, because it is his birthday, and it's a birthday conundrum. We're gonna solve the Ben birthday crisis. So, you guys ready? So on the count, go ahead and cover your ears. And I will tell you when to start. You're going to sing as loud as you can. You ready? Cover your ears. Yep. Cover your ears. All right, on the count of 3, sing the song you have as loud as you can. 1, 2, 3.
We are the champions. We are the champions.
Thank you. Okay, let us stop. Okay, Paula, thank you. Excellent. Okay, Ben, scale 1 to 10. How celebrated do you feel?
I was kind of getting into it.
All right, it was a little chaotic, right? They each had different songs. Same goal, they thought, but very different tunes. I'm going to ask all of you really quickly. Come up here really quickly all together. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Follow me, come on. Really quickly, really quickly.
Now is the dancing?
No. I really want to dance. Go ahead and stand up here. Okay, now Ben, we're going to try to do justice because it's your birthday and we have to do birthday justice. So now, on the count of 3, I want you to sing together to sing happy birthday. You ready? Okay, on the count of 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ben. Happy birthday to you.
Give them a round of applause. Thank you. Each of these individuals, I'm proud to say, represent what just happened right now.
And many more.
What happens is, whether we're looking at prevention, right, or even addressing the crisis, or even the post situation, regardless of what part and what section we find ourselves in, we have to do it collectively. We have to understand the impacts of trauma. We have to have different multidisciplines to come together to address the roots as well as the overall well-being. So when I look at our child care centers, and I'm saying we do a phenomenal job doing social emotional literacy and coping, what happens after that? Who's helping the parents and the family? Are we able to provide effective family counseling because maybe someone at home is struggling with substance use and intimate partner violence that no one talks about? And I know that because if I give you my ACE score, I have 6 out of 10. My husband has 8 out of 10. And the Salvation Army was there for my husband when he was 6 years old, and his mother, to place him in a place that was safe while his father was doing treatment for his anger. And to this day, he still reflects about the dignity, the love, the sense of belonging that he and his mother felt to be able to transition into independence again. And my last spiel, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, says people need to have we gotta be able to meet the basic needs first, then create safety. I feel safe because my survival brain is going, woo, my lid is flipping, that's a whole other lecture. We have to provide love and support, it's in there. Maslow's hierarchy of needs says I need love and belonging. And then I get to self-esteem and then self-actualization. So if we're looking at long-term holistic wellness, it takes all those parts, it takes all of us together in a coordinated and collaborative fashion to do so.
Thank you for your comments. We did come back and vote for a daytime Emmy. So I'm going to shift to Amber, who
I
know
can't
for
go
many
after
years.
that. Come on. That's what we call a mic drop move. I'm going to call her Professor Maddie.
Yeah, no, you can deliver in spades. So the work you're doing with Aviva Family Services and for the decade plus that I watched you grow and excel as Senior Operating Officer at St. Anne's Family Services, this is a very familiar space for you, especially in the Hollywood market. So the question to you that I've got is that we're not in a one-size-fits-all world where the complexion of homelessness is the same in all communities. We know that it's not. Therefore, how do you best address the unique differences based upon those affected versus where they are living?
Thanks, Craig. And can I just repeat what an absolute honor it is to be on the stage with you and, of course, my fellow panelists, but it's extremely special to be up here with you today, Craig. I think that your question underscores a common misconception, that there's some sort of magic bullet or perfect combination of solutions that we can just hit copy, paste across our LA communities, but I think all of us in this room know that it's just not that simple. And that's because the root cause varies from person to person, and it also varies from place to place. And so the solutions really have to be tailored in that same way. At Aviva, which is in the heart of Hollywood, as Craig mentioned, we see these challenges every single day. For young people, it's oftentimes family rejection, especially for the LGBTQ+ community, or it's the trauma of growing up in the foster care system. For others, it's untreated mental illness or substance use, or sometimes a combination of both, or it's the chain reaction of sudden job loss, or having to flee domestic violence. These challenges compound, right? If you're struggling with your mental health, it's gonna be that much harder for you to hold down a job, or finish school, or to maintain stable housing. And tailoring solutions really just means taking the time to listen, right? For example, a doctor can't diagnose a patient and come up with a treatment plan until they've completed a full examination. And as we all know, since we all go to the doctor, that starts with asking lots of questions. Every community has its
7 minutes via Long Beach Freeway.
7 minutes via Long Beach Freeway. Every community has its own set of challenges, but it also has its own set of strengths, and that's exactly how we approach the build-out of one of Aviva's newest programs, our Youth Drop-In Center, which is also in Hollywood. Rather than assume that we knew what young people needed, we actually took the time to ask them. And we asked the youth that were in Hollywood. And you know what? Their answers weren't surprising. A hot shower, a warm meal, a safe place to just take a deep breath. And from there we just deepened the layers of support. Therapy, substance use treatment, and job training. And to your point.
I was just going to say, uniquely, Hollywood is a cauldron of everything.
Sure.
Okay, so you see things there that are not necessarily seen in other communities. runaway kids, family estrangement, the LGBTQ community,
That's right.
substance abuse, et cetera, et cetera.
All of it, yes. And to your point, Craig, you know, Hollywood, geography matters. Hollywood is dense, it's highly visible, it's prohibitively expensive, right? It's also where the entertainment and tourism industries intersect and create some real vulnerabilities. Young people come to Hollywood chasing their dreams, hoping to make it big, but then their plans fall apart. We hear this story every single day at our youth drop-in center. And then they become easy targets for exploitation, right? So that's where the conversation about housing becomes really important. I know we've been hearing, not just today, but for the past several months and years, we need more housing, we need more housing. Yes, absolutely, we need more affordable housing, but housing alone isn't enough, right? You know, we have to make sure that it's paired with services that meets each person where they are on their journey. I've seen this too many times. Not everyone is ready for their own apartment or to live on their own. So there has to be the full spectrum of options. Interim housing, we've been hearing about earlier today. I really appreciate the mayor spoke to that. Interim, transitional, supportive, permanent housing. And that way every person can take the step that's most realistic to them and where they currently are. Otherwise, we're just putting a roof over trauma and not addressing the real reason why someone became unhoused in the first place, right? So to me, you know, solving homelessness is about identifying hyper-local and individualized solutions that fit both the person and the place, right? It's housing plus. It's housing plus services. Ending homelessness is not just about putting a roof over someone's head, but it's about making sure that they have the support to actually keep it, and doing so in partnership with the community so that both the people and its neighborhoods can thrive together.
Yeah, well, good for you for so steadily creating a safe harbor, particularly for women and children, in a really tough market.
Thank you.
So, to Rocky, another of my longtime friends. So, uniquely, you and Mike are not just lawyers, but as former city attorneys in particular, you've really had a very strong operative hand in focusing on homelessness with both, as I said earlier, a big heart and a great mind. Keeping in mind that there can't be competition between the rights of citizens and property owners and public safety, and then the realities attendant to the unhoused. So we'll focus on that a little more specifically. My question to you is, to those who would argue that there will always be certain people in certain areas who will be living under bridges, adjacent to freeways, by the beach, and in various areas throughout our community, what is your answer to them? Are they right? And if not, why not? But if so, how do we manage things so that the rights of the unhoused are not in competition with safety and the legitimate interests of the public?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I think everybody deserves and has a right to shelter and housing, period. Right? But as you also know, like Mike and the rest of this panel, I'm a dreamer. Right? So I think that we can solve this. But I do think it is what everyone has said here is that. So, you know, we were raised with stories about werewolves and, you know, monsters and things like that. And we always thought, you know, at the end of the story, they shot him with a silver bullet and it was gone. Right? Took care of it. And so we think of our public policy that way. Oh, if this is a bad monster, this is what it's doing. We just got to find out one thing, and if we just discover it, we'll get rid of the problem. You know what? Amber pointed out, it's not that way. Right? Now, can it be solved? Yeah, I do think. You know, like, look, I don't know what the number is now, it changes every day, but somewhere between 70 and 100,000 homeless on the streets right now. Right? Well, I was in government when we had the Northridge earthquake. I don't know, there was 40, 50,000 people on the street after that. We figured out how to put them in shelter pretty quickly, in days, rather. When COVID happened, right? We built 100,000 square foot tents that became hospitals. So really the issue is not finding a silver bullet, but really saying, is this really a crisis or not? Because we're not treating it like a crisis. I mean, I know some people in government have said, this is a crisis. Okay, what does that mean? The number one thing we're going to deal with every day until we solve it, that's a crisis. Right? I'm a big fan of that. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Right? What would happen if we made this our number one priority and we dealt with prevention? I dealt with them one by one, even 100,000, if you dealt with them one by one, it's not that much. Compared to our population, there's 10 million people in this region. One by one, figure out what their issues are and solve for them. And then prevent it from happening in the future. What if we did that here in Los Angeles? Made it our number one priority. What would that do to our economy? What would it say to the world? Look what they did in Los Angeles. The dreamers there solved it. Right? So that's really what I think. It's really just a demonstration of courage. Are you willing to say that this is a crisis and it's our number one thing we need to deal with? That's what I think will ultimately help us solve the equation. And then there's nothing really to manage at that point. You're just reaching out to your fellow man and giving him a hand up.
So that point of yours is a great point to the extent that you say focus on the individual, determine what brought them to the street, and then deal with that. So, question to all of you is, our unhoused population to be vivisected, dissected, microsected, whatever the case, into groups to determine, do we send all of our unhoused veterans to the West Side campus of the VA? For those who have a significant dual diagnosis of mental illness, substance abuse, do we deal with the substance abuse first and then get them clinically treated for whatever their mental ailment is? It's complex in that respect. Or is it just an elderly couple that is on the street because they had a significant medical incident that ran in parallel with the loss of a job, and they got kicked out of their apartment and are living out of their van? So how do we deal with that?
I would just say, again, you deal with it one by one. Even at 100,000, it's not that many compared to the number of people we have. A lot of people, like in this space, are always thinking, well, if we just have this solution, it'll solve the problem. Build more housing. Okay, that's maybe part of it, but it's much more complicated, and you have to start at the very basic level of each individual and what their needs are. And yeah, maybe they go to the veterans facility, but maybe not. Maybe they go to
Bill Shelter has been a great habitat.
Yeah, maybe they change geography. Maybe they move to Arizona. There's lots of things that may make more sense for that particular individual because they may have issues with, being part of a gang here or whatever, and they need to get out of the geography, right? Things like that. But that's what I think we need to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. It's a lot of work, but if it's a crisis, that's what we should do.
So I'm going to get Maddie's comment to that question to get the Army's perspective on that issue, but also first let me go to Mike and go back to the prevention before. Sorry about that.
Big fake out, right?
Sorry, I could have just handled it. So before we get into to getting them placed, how do we get to a place of knowing what's likely to lead them to the street and preempt it in the prevention model that you've been advocating?
So it's really interesting that for the first time in the country, here in Los Angeles, there's a project to test that very thing. There's a project called the Homelessness Prevention Unit. It's housed in the county. It predicts who is likely to become homeless before they ask for help, and then aggressively reaches out to them to try to connect them to housing and services that they need. It's one of the very few programs that's actually been studied. The California Policy Lab, based at UCLA, has studied the efficacy of that program. And it turns out, not to get too technical about this, but you're 71% more likely never to need a homeless service if you take advantage of that connection, which is a promising approach. It is not getting enough support financially, but it is a successful model. More generally, there are a lot of studies that say that homelessness is fundamentally a housing problem. And there are many studies that show that jurisdictions that have more housing, more affordable housing available, have lower rates of homelessness. That's clearly one of the most fundamental things we can do, is to create more housing that's affordable. But there are other things too. What's fascinating is the relatively small amounts of money that, when provided to people on the precipice of homelessness, have kept them housed. At the average around the country, about $6,000. But in many cases, a few $100s keep someone stably housed. And again, that's the key. If they are housed and they're precariously housed, to be able to intervene with them with that particular thing that they might need, huge difference. In Los Angeles, there's an experiment with what's called right to counsel, which says that if you are a tenant in need of an eviction defense opportunity, that there'll be a lawyer for you. Tremendous expansion in that universe right now, because most studies show that if you are in a normal detainer and you have no lawyer, you're going to lose like every time. And that changes dramatically if you have a lawyer. So there's that's an ingredient in this process. There are what could be called holistic legal services. Like you're about to lose your public benefits, you have no one to turn to. Who's going to intervene for you before you fall into homelessness to protect you? You're a domestic violence survivor, you're being abused, and that's about to render you homeless, absent some intervention to have you be stably housed. So there is a menu of things that we know can work. And the question is, are we going to devote our resources to, again, arm wrestling this reactive paradigm that we have into prevention in the first place? Not that prevention is the cure to everything. We have people who are experiencing homelessness right now who need help. But by devoting almost all our resources to that universe of people, we are missing the opportunity to prevent a huge continued crisis forever. And that to me is a cause now for all of us, and really a choice. And one reason I'm here is because I think we need more people in the community to advocate to make that choice right now when resources are beginning to be available. So, my thoughts. Now.
Thank you for that. So, Manny, we're swimming in the same pool together with the Army, collectively looking. I know our Metro Board has toiled constantly to evaluate this very dynamic situation. And then you, as a ranking officer of the Army, you're doing the heavy lifting here. Okay, it's an area that the Army has been so focused on and successful in many regards. And I would say, in my impression, managing the fire, dealing with the fire, not putting out the fire, because as you put out one, another emerges, but it's the continuum of what we're faced with. There is one person who addressed our Metro Board that I would like to shine a light on just for a moment, and that is our former district attorney, Jackie Lacey, who is a dear friend, and I thank you for being here, Jackie. You've been wonderful, and your words to our board years ago were so right on and heartfelt, and I know you've always, like the panel before me, have had a great heart and great action with respect to our homeless community, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Greg.
And forgive me for embarrassing you. Matt?
So as we've all, it's been shared, right? Each person is individual, and as I shared earlier, the context matters of what's happening for that particular person. I thought of two stories that show the different spectrums of the importance of early assessment and screenings to say, what are some factors that put this person at risk? I think from a mental health perspective, the PHQ-9 and GAD-7 are quick little measures to identify if a person's having anxiety or depression concerns that we need to assess more thoroughly for. I mentioned the ACEs. What if we were to have everybody do quick trauma measures to see just where are they at? Who is this person, and what is some of the piece of the story that they might be willing just to check a box to say, yes, I've experienced this, before they're ready to tell their story, because that's the other thing. So the two stories that came to mind, one is one of the families actually out of Whittier. It was a single individual who was escaping domestic violence. She had an addiction that she was trying to recover from, and from her initial just contact with the Army, because someone told her the Army can help, she was able to get connected. I go back to live transfers. People talk about warm handoffs. Warm handoffs don't work. That's a whole other lecture. Live handoff to substance use treatment. She was then received back to one of our locations where she received ongoing on-site mental health, housing support, financial literacy, and employment readiness. She was also battling cancer. So not only was happy to report that she's been cleared, she got to ring her bell. She also now has employment. She's an in-home aide, and she just secured her own independent housing. Now that's one story that took different programs, different pieces of, I look at our incredible leadership that's here representing some of these programs. That took many layers, and then that's not even including the additional outside other partners that were phenomenal to come in, the medical providers, other social networks that came in to help her. And then I think of another family, they lost their jobs. Mental health is stable. Trauma is not really a thing for them. They didn't have any that needed to be addressed. But they needed a rental deposit, and they needed 3 months of rent to make sure they didn't go unhoused. But we assess all those pieces to say, how do we make sure that you're well today and well ongoing for the future? And it looks different. And I go back to having these different measures and strategies as a collective to say, hey, how do we help this one person take all these different components and pieces together? And as the Army, at SoCal, we represent 9 different counties, so we're also taking best practices, right? What are the best practices that we're seeing? We have Chris here, who's representing our territories office. How are we seeing things even on the western states? What's happening across the different states, and how are we bringing that information together? So we do it through a compassionate lens. We do it through a restorative practice lens, meaning we're going to give high support. We're also going to give accountability. We're asking, we're going to provide you these things, and maybe for the next steps, we need your help to also buy into the things that you're engaging in, right? We talk about restorative practices. And we do it through faith, hope, and dignity, right? That's what leads to transformation. There are spiritual components, whether they, choose to embrace the spiritual component, it's offered there to say there is hope for you. Not only just for today, but everlasting hope. And we're here to serve you because we love you. It's not our love, it's a love that comes from above, from our Father in heaven, that pushes our ministry forward to say, hey, we need to provide this for you, and we're here to see you, whether you're on the street in Hollywood in front of the weigh-in, or you're in Santa Barbara, or you're in Pasadena. Regardless of where you're at, we see you.
And that is truly the beauty of the Army. It is a non-transactional benefactor to the neediest among us. Giving without discrimination, as we heard earlier, non-judgmental, non-transactional. And it's an honor to be on the Metro Board, knowing that that's our centerpiece objective for all of us. So let me ask my panel, is there a summary point that any of you want to make, or shall we turn it over for a couple of questions from the audience?
Questions are fun.
Okay. Anybody have?
I don't need
No?
a microphone. I'm curious, Rocky. You're talking about calling this a crisis. I got to visit the global headquarters for Salvation Army, and they said, "Hey, this is it globally, homelessness." Right. Do you see a day where there could be some federal, state, local agreement where we could call this some type of national FEMA-like crisis? There have been rumors about that in the past to unlock other resources and create maybe large centers of help. There have been different things that are being about in the last administration that didn't get there, but I'm curious if you could dig into some of your thoughts, how that could be played out in a larger way.
Yeah, I don't need a microphone either, but I would just say that I don't need it. But look, that's leadership, right? That's leadership. So it's the leadership, and we always advocate that to our elected officials or to other people. It really comes from all of us. We either demonstrate it or we don't, right? And so, yeah, if you think that's the way to bring resources together, one thing I will say though is we always, and this happens in government a lot, we focus on getting the money, finding the resources, right? And that's a lot of work and you don't know what you're going to really spend it on yet. You generally know you're going to spend it on homelessness. But I always learned, I worked for Dick Reardon when he was mayor, and he used to always say, come up with the project first. Money will find it. Right? So that's where I think if you said like the project is getting the state, feds, and local together, okay, that doesn't sound right to me. But I mean, it could be, but maybe it's like Mike's idea about prevention, and we start there and then build it out for solving he's preventing, and then people that need services now, we just deal with them. I don't know, but I think you come up with a project, and the money will find it. The money will find it.
Because we spend a lot of money already.
Yeah, we spend a ton. Like I'm not really one of those, left versus right. I'm a Democrat, but not Democrat versus Republican. But I'm really like, is it innovative or not? Like we got to find innovation because what we have now isn't. So we need to that's really where we need to search for is that innovation. And by the way, that means taking risks. And some of those things will not work. But you got to try things that throw them up and see if they work, and we might find a few that will. So, thanks.
You're absolutely right, Rocky. It's not a bipartisan situation because we don't question those among us. The ones on the street are not asked what party affiliation you have, what's your religion, what's your origin. They're there non-transactionally to help. That's the mission. Everything that ensues thereafter is just part of a continuum that is, as you said, unique to their given needs to help them to get back on their feet. Okay, anybody else? Okay.
We can ask you questions.
Mike's
Well,
really
see
good
you.
at that.
In the back?
So I get the long-term prevention, identifying the problem, dealing with it. But many of us are dialing 911 with our homes broken into and no one shows up. Many of us have kids in public schools with tents surrounding them. Many of us work for employers whose property are surrounded by junk RVs. I like it's a crisis. When Katrina hit New Orleans, the Republican administration was criticized that it took 3 days for the National Guard to touch down and start housing people. We have an empty convention center here, 700,000 feet. I don't know why they want to throw another $2.9 billion at it. I guess they didn't get the memo that LA is no longer a big convention center location. But we have these assets that are wasting away. St. Vincent Hospital, etc. How do we get, I know the Salvation Army is not supposed to be political, but maybe it's time you form a pact to start putting pressure on the politicians, because leaving it to their own ability has gotten you nowhere. I'm sorry. Because they spent $6 million to litigate because they don't want to account for $2 billion of unaccountable funds. So with headlines like that, how do you get the private sector, how do you get taxpayers, how do you get homeowners to buy in and support
So I have so many different thoughts. So I mean, well, look, almost 8 years ago now, I wrote a very controversial piece for the Times. I said in the piece, if we had a major earthquake, there would be a FEMA field general here on the scene knocking heads. We know who is in charge, and they would resolve the dilemma. And then I wrote, we have the moral equivalent of that disaster in homelessness, and no one's in charge. It was not that there weren't people working on the issue, but when you have a diffusion of responsibility, with everybody owning a little piece of it, but no one actually in charge, accountable for what's happening, things don't move the way they should. So I'm a big fan of that model. You heard me say earlier, when it comes to a system to deal with prevention, somebody accountable in charge. Big deal to me. I think, let me segue though to be more precise about your question. I think for years here, there's been this false choice between having safe streets and safe and accessible sidewalks and stuff on the one hand, and very urgently dealing with the legitimate needs of people experiencing homelessness. It's a false choice. We can do both things simultaneously. And when I'm the city attorney, I said to Judge Carter at the hearing at Amy Turk's place, at the hearing at the women's shelter, I said, this is not a problem for a judge. What has to happen is that elected officials need to assert themselves in a way that is politically accountable and grapple with this. Your point is you're frustrated about we see the absence of that. I think there are some who would say, but the counterpoint is we're now actually seeing a diminution in homelessness for a variety of programs that have been in place. But it is still too prevalent. There are still too many encampments around our community. There are still too many people dying on our streets every day. There are still too many people who feel that their business is being encumbered. The whole thing is still happening, right? One of my major concerns, I attend a ton of meetings now of various governmental programs and entities designed to grapple with homelessness. There are too many of them, by the way. There are many, many of them. And I am concerned, I just said this to an elected official on Friday, that there has been a lack of engagement recently, that there's been a decrease in focus on this. In part because there are so many things happening right now that people are dissipating, whether their eyes not on the ball anymore. That needs to change. But having said that, I hear your lack of faith in elected leadership. I'm not in elected leadership right now. I hear it. I understand. But I do think that we have opportunities now that we cannot let slip through our fingers in all the ways I've described. And just be very personal about it. About 3 blocks down, on the street where I live, when I was city attorney, a person experiencing homelessness leapt over a few fences, ended up in the backyard of a contemporary of my son. This guy and 3 of his friends lived in a house together on my street. The guy who leapt over the fences
Saved 8 minutes via North Grand Avenue.
chased this guy into the kitchen. He found a knife. And my son's friend had to hold him on his lap while he died in his arms on my street. So I am not going to ever say that there aren't legitimate issues to be grappled with from the standpoint of the community at large. But I think that we miss the point when we say this is just about enforcement. I think we miss the point when we say it's just about housing. But it is principally about housing. There is a role for enforcement. There's a role for mental health services and stuff. And the last thing I want to say is, by the way, one thing we haven't talked about at all, and Jackie reminds me of this when I see Jackie here, 19% of people entering homelessness in California come from where?
Out of state.
No, incarceration. 19%. I called the person in charge of homelessness prevention in New Jersey because I noted the statistics there. Only 6% of their homeless population comes from incarceration. What is the major distinction? They do a lot more to prevent people who are about to emerge from incarceration from having no job and no place to go than we do. There are smart things we know how to do. What you're hearing me say is, have somebody in charge of getting the damn thing done.
Yeah, I would just add that you know, Carl, you need an owner, someone who's in charge, right? Someone who you could hold accountable, right? And usually that's the mayor by default, but it could be anybody that wants to take it on. I'll just add this. I mean, I tell this story a lot because I think people really don't appreciate how you might then direct your resources to solve problems like this. But we do know this, that people living on the streets are shortening their lives. Right? We know that. That's a fact, right? So if we had somebody on the top of this building, you can see him, who was going to jump off, what would we do? We would send millions of dollars of resources, ambulances, fire department, the police department, a psychologist, all to prevent that person from shortening their life. That's what's happening right now on our streets. There's someone dying today on our streets. And we're ignoring it. We're looking the other way. That's what Mike was pointing out. Like we don't have our eye on the ball. So that's part of that crisis moment. But that's how we have to think about this. We do this in other places. We put resources towards things that are really important, but this is also really important, and we have to treat it with the importance it deserves.
Okay, good comments, Rocky. And Carl has a great feel for our business community, our real estate community. In that sector, we might all collectively ponder a closer triangulation between our political sector, our business sector, and our philanthropic sector, the 501c3s and other philanthropic/humanitarian orgs. That triangulation is necessary. It can't be a game of tag or it. They all need to be working together. And if there's a singular organization to pay attention to that, there's commonality and interest. So there, and hopefully we can manage it and, by the grace of God, perhaps solve. But thank you all for your wonderful participation.